been hot here in Vegas, so I decided to make some watermelon dice using black sesame seeds. Here's the normal resin I usually use when making dice. This is my first attempt at making these, so you'll see me playing around with just the normal mica powder and color shift mica powders, like this one here. For the meat of the watermelon, I'll be mixing 40 milliliters of resin. This set took me so long to make. I had to put it into the pressure pot 3 times, once for the flesh, the second for the rind, and then the third for the skin. I guess it's also partially my fault since I didn't have to leave them in the pot for so long each time, but I always start the next step so late in the day that I didn't want to stay up late to finish it. So here I'm checking to make sure that I mix the resin well, scrape the sides, scrape the stick, and then just make sure there's no streaks in the resin. Once I was satisfied with that, I split it into another cup evenly, but in hindsight I could have gotten away with a 70-30 split here. So in both cups I put in the normal pink mica powder from Let's Resin. And the left one I put in just the tiniest bit of color shift rose red from Let's Resin. The chameleon powder goes into this right one here. I don't know what color it is and I don't remember where it's from. I hated pink as a kid, but I gotta say this rose red and pink mix that I did was really pretty, and like my younger self would be throwing a tantrum if she heard me say that. With that said though, I did add more of the rose red because I didn't think it was dark enough for watermelon. It got a little messy in the cup since I dropped some of the mica powder on this stick, but it's okay, I got through it. And once I was satisfied with the color, I moved on to mixing the right cup. As soon as I started mixing this, I already knew I wasn't gonna like this one at all. It was too dull and it didn't look either pink or red. Figured I'd try adding in some more of the chameleon powder, but after mixing that, it looked worse than the original, so I gave up on that one. Now for the fun part, adding in the sesame seeds. I probably should have used a spoon to do this since I put a little bit too much in both, but I was too lazy to go grab one. And really you'll see that that's not the only thing that I should have done. Thought of it a little too late, these seeds are going to sink right to the bottom. But carrying on, I decided to pour the rose red pink mix into a numbered mold. This is what I meant when I said I could have gotten away with a 70-30 split earlier. I decided for the chameleon and pink mix that I was going to put it into my blank set, which is smaller than the numbered mold that I did for the first one. I had a lot more of this mix left over, so I ended up pouring it into the number mold that these blanks go into. Even though it wasn't enough to fill the numbered mold, I wasn't about to waste the rest of this mix. As always, I take my heat gun and pop any bubbles on top before putting it into the pressure pot. Now it's gonna look like I didn't pressurize the pot, but I actually did put it up to 32 psi off camera. After 24 hours, because I had work the next day, I mixed some white mica powder with lawn green mica powder from Let's Resin to make a lighter green for the rind of the watermelon. I forgot to mention earlier when I was pouring the meat of the watermelon, I'm sorry that sounds weird, but I only poured half to 2/3 because I couldn't really see inside the mold, but the aim was for 2/3 of the mold. Again, for the rind I was aiming for 2/3, but since there was so little space left, I ended up over pouring for some of them. Again, pop the bubbles with a heat gun and into the pressure pot it goes at 32 psi for another 24 hours. I decided to use normal green from less resin to make the watermelon skin, but after mixing it for a little bit, I decided it was a little too light for me, so I added some grass green mica powder to try and darken it. So after I thought I was done mixing it in, I was satisfied with how dark it was, but while I was pouring it into the molds, it was pretty light to start with, and then it started to darken up towards the end. So I guess I didn't mix it in well enough. I don't know how that happened. Please ignore that I started pouring resin onto the cap faces that didn't need it. I do end up realizing that and moving on. I had a lot more left over after the cap faces, so I ended up pouring it into 2 more dies in the larger number mold. Finally, we can cap these molds and call it a day. And again, as always, back into the pressure pot it goes for another 24 hours at 32 psi. Here's what the blank inserts look like. They're the ones that I use the chameleon and pink mica powder in. I don't really like how they look. The meat of the watermelon looks a little too dark for me, not really red, not really pink. So I'm not gonna waste resin to cast this into a number mold. The pink and rose red color shift set came out a lot better. The color of the watermelon flesh came out exactly as I wanted it to be. The D8 from that set is one of my favorites just because there weren't that many sesame seeds in here. So when it fell to the bottom of the mold, it spread out very nicely on the 8 face. I also really like the D6 from the set. Not so much because of how the sesame seeds lay, but more because of the layering. It's almost like I've cut a square piece of a watermelon that had a really thick rind. Oh hi! Thank you for watching to the end. I tried not scripting what I said. Does that make sense? Anyways, I tried not to do a script for this video, so hopefully it sounded more natural. Let me know what you think of it below. Other than that, like and subscribe. Okay, bye!